Jonathan Pollard. This is my non-compete one-hitter quitter flow for today, okay? For the past 50 years, America has normalized rampant non-compete abuse. And the problem is highly regionalized. The reason for this is historical. The reason for this is slavery and the fucking Civil War. That's what this is really the fuck about, okay? To go ultimate on it. But I'm just a bald-headed jerk-faced meanie and a raging psychopath. I understand, okay? But follow me, right? Non-compete abuse over the past 30, 40 years, where has it been the worst in America, okay? Not the Northeast, right? New York, New Jersey, right? Maine, not up there. Not the West Coast, California, Oklahoma, North Dakota, not the Mountain West, right? Where has it been the worst? It's been the worst in the American South. Isn't that curious? That's not curious at all, okay? It makes perfect sense historically. Non-compete abuse is an echo of slavery and indentured servitude. That's where it all flows the fuck back to, people, okay? It's about being able to own another person's labor. After the employment relationship has ended, after there's a mutuality of exchange, right? It's about owning and controlling labor. And that's why the South fetishizes non-compete agreements. And that's why so many old white men are shook at my crusade against non-compete agreements. Because here I am, a half freaking buck mulatto out there fighting against non-compete abuse. I've got a tattoo of the day they fucking hung John Brown. That's right, people. That's right. Turn around. There it goes. That's the day they hung John Brown. Right there, 12/2/59, 1859. I'm an abolitionist, right? New slaves out there working under non-compete agreements for their corporate masses. That's what this shit is really all about, okay? And if you trace it from the Civil War, you trace it from slavery, you go through the civil rights movement, okay? And in the civil rights movement, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, okay? In the civil rights movement, you had southern states down there violating the fuck out of federal law, okay? And basically giving a middle finger to the federal government and saying black people aren't going to participate in the economy. They're not going to go to our schools. We're not going to integrate over our dead body, right? God save the Confederacy. That's what the civil rights movement was about, right? Just follow me, right? Trace it, okay? So now, 2024, you have southern states, you have southern judges, you have southern lawyers fighting to uphold abusive, overly broad, totally bogus non-compete agreements to restrict what people can do with their labor so that companies and so that rich people can own people's fucking labor, okay? That's what this is about. And now, 2024, right, the past 10 years or so, 2015, 2010, whatever, you have all these southern states and southern judges violating the hell out of federal antitrust law because non-compete agreements are an antitrust problem, right? They're an antitrust problem. When I started my own law firm back in 2012 and I started defending non-compete cases, and I would defend everybody. I would defend a respiratory therapist. I would defend security guards. I would defend factory workers. My God, I defended a factory worker one time who didn't speak a lick of fucking English. She didn't speak a lick of English. She worked on the factory floor, and the president of the fucking factory had the audacity to say that this woman who was making $10 an hour might have had access to some of their confidential information. Where was the information? Locked up in the office? Do you have any reason to believe that she ever went into the office? Well, she could have gotten in there. She could have gotten some of the files. Well, what language were the files in, fuckstick? They were in English, and she doesn't speak a word of English, and you're in litigation against her to enforce a non-compete agreement? How preposterous is that? But there is never a non-compete case. There is never a non-compete case or a non-compete agreement where there is not some thirsty corporate lawyer who wants those billable hours and would pursue that case like a dog with a bone. That's how fucked up America is, people. That's how fucked up America is. That's why America is a late stage failing post-capitalist, crony-capitalist, anarcho-capitalist regime. There are no rules for your corporate overlords, people. None. There are rules for thee and for me, but not for your corporate overlords, right? They get to violate antitrust law. They get to enter into horizontal conspiracies with other companies where they agree not to hire each other's employees. Why do they do that? To suppress wages. And they get away with this every single day. Judges, especially in the American South, especially in Florida, especially in Texas, they rubber stamp non-compete injunctions every single day, and it violates federal antitrust law. And they have been thumbing their noses at federal law and at the U.S. government for the past 40 years. And there have been no consequences and no repercussions. They have ruined millions and millions of people's lives. They have suppressed wages for millions and millions of Americans, and they have gotten away with it in broad daylight. They have gotten away with it in broad daylight. And now what are they going to do, right? I'll talk about the FTC Act. And I'm not here talking as like Jonathan Pollard, attorney at law. I'm here talking as Jonathan Pollard, American fucking citizen who still has the right in this country to engage in political speech. And this is political speech. So all my haters want to come at me, come the fuck ahead and come at me. This is political speech. It's court protected under the First Amendment, so I don't really care. But this is the ultimate of where this goes, okay? The FTC Act, which has been on the books for over 100 years, clearly gives the FTC the authority to regulate unfair means of competition, okay? This is an unfair means of competition. It reduces competition for labor and ultimately suppresses wages. Non-compete abuse is ultimately part of a massive wage suppression scheme, and everybody's on the take. Companies benefit because they suppress wages, they reduce labor costs, they reduce labor attrition, which is costly, having to replace people, and then law firms, man, they suck at the tit of non-compete abuse 24/7 because non-compete enforcement is such a big business for so many big law firms. How fucked up is that, right? Antitrust law, restraints of trade, agreements not to compete should be presumptively illegal, and yet some of the biggest law firms in America and the world have entire practice groups dedicated to suing people to enforce non-compete agreements. The emperor has no fucking clothes, okay? This is your America, people. This is what you have wrought, all right? It's all a scam. America has largely devolved into a pro-corporate scam, okay? And these people have friends in high places. They're tight with the powers that be. Many of these people who come out of the sort of corporate orthodoxy, the big law firms, the corporate side lawyers, they ascend to positions of power, meaning i.e. they become judges, and then they just perpetuate that worldview. Ultimate, there is no law. Okay, people? There is no law. Law is a shell game. Law is a fabrication. Law is made up. I understand the law says something, but at the end of the day, what the law says is ultimately subjugated to the political, philosophical views of 9 emperor kings who have lifetime appointments on the United States Supreme Court. That's a problem, right? Giving these people tenure for life to sit on the highest court in the land where there is no check against them. You know, people always talk about the law, right? And it's interesting, like, I call real shots across the board on everybody, left and right. One of my favorite things that these right-wing nuts say is, follow the Constitution. Follow the Constitution. Follow the damn Constitution. I got my pocket Constitution and my Trump Bible, right? Follow the Constitution. Wow. What does it even mean, homeboy, right? What does it mean? There is no there. The Constitution means whatever the fuck the Supreme Court says it means. There is no inherent meaning anymore in anything, in any law or statute or whatever. It's a political decision up to 9 emperor kings, okay? And America is just like, you know, it's just the swings, right? The way it goes from one side of the spectrum to the other, right? America is so unstable. It's way more unstable than anybody fucking realizes. It's literally hanging by a thread. And so now this whole non-compete situation, right? You have corporate America. They've already filed lawsuits. They've gone into one of their favorite hand-picked courts, right? Let's go into one of these here Texas district courts that's only got one judge that we know is on our side and is ultra-conservative and is going to rule for us, right? As again, America's a shell game. The American legal system is a fantastic illustration of the fact that it's a shell game and that the emperor has no clothes, right? The FTC passes a rule, okay? The FTC was granted this authority by Congress 100 years ago. They're just using the authority they've always had. And so now, some company, no doubt backed by the Chamber of Commerce and big corporate money, and probably big law money, because big law needs the billable hours from non-compete enforcement to sustain its business model, dinosaur business model, billing hours and whatnot. But that's what they do. It takes dinosaurs a long time to die off. And so they filed a lawsuit to stay or issue an injunction to prevent the FTC's rule banning non-compete agreements from moving forward. And a political actor, federal judge, will no doubt rubber stamp that and say, I do declare that this company faces the risk of irreparable harm. Well, let's unpack that, right? I'm an unpacker. Let's unpack it. You have a company going in and saying, we will be irreparably harmed, because that is the standard. That is the linchpin for injunctive relief under Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, Rule 65, which governs the issuance of preliminary injunctions in federal court. But again, what did I just say? Rules don't have any fucking meaning, okay? The rules say something, and I understand those words have dictionary definitions, and there is a presumptive meaning there. There is a reasonable man standard there. We can all interpret it and understand it the same way. But then there's whatever a political actor judge decides to do, who's basically handpicked for a case because he's a political actor. All right? That's the reality of the system. I'm not allowed to say that. I'm not supposed to say that, right? I'm breaking the unwritten rules of being a lawyer. But that's really how the sausage is made. So this company's going to go into federal court and say they need an injunction because they're facing the prospect of irreparable harm if they can't use non-compete agreements. Let me get this straight. If you can't make all of your employees sign a non-compete agreement, your company is at risk of catastrophic existential harm. Number one, you probably have a pretty shitty business model, if that's the reality. But number two, I call bullshit. The harm is not from unfair competition. The harm is because you're going to have to pay people more money. That's what is that irreparable harm? Having to pay your employees more money? Is any of this irreparable harm, right? Because irreparable harm is supposed to be something that cannot be compensated with money damages. But I have no faith in the federal judiciary to actually work through this and apply the law correctly. Instead, I expect a federal judge, probably in Texas somewhere, right? Shock and all, surprise, surprise, the American South, the Confederacy rises again, okay? Will rubber stamp an injunction, right? Isn't that interesting? Nationwide, and say, I am declaring nationwide that the FTC's ban on non-compete agreements shall be paused until further resolution by this court or the appellate courts or the Supreme Court. That's what's going to happen. And then ultimate, it'll go to the Supreme Court. And there's a very good likelihood that the Supreme Court will say, what? Right? Eye of Thundera. Fucking Panthro, bitches. The Supreme Court will say, we believe that Congress is really better suited to rule upon this issue. So never mind what the FTC Act says. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. We think this is a major question, right? Isn't it wild how, people talk about textualism? And again, it's these people on the right wing, okay? They talk about textualism, okay? They say, follow the law, apply the law, follow the Constitution, right? They talk about textualism, okay? But whenever textualism is not convenient and politically expedient, they just pull out these doctrines, often doctrines that haven't been used for years, right? There's always a doctrine to to flip it the other direction and get you the political outcome you want, right? That's how America works, bro. If you believe in the system, if you think it has integrity, if you think it is legitimate, if you think it is functional, if you think it is just, if you think it is fair, if you think it is reasonable, you are smoking something. That's a political system. It's not a legal system, it's a political system. And the Supreme Court justices, they are more political actors than they are legal actors. And so when it goes to them, have no illusions that they're just going to apply the law or read the text, right? No, they're going to do whatever they feel is politically expedient. They're going to follow their own politics and philosophies and morals and principles because there's nobody above them. There's no check against them. They basically make up the law. They are basically emperor kings for life. And I think that given the current constitution of the Supreme Court, the odds are that they're going to say the FTC can't do this because it's a major question. Isn't that convenient? It's a major question. So we're just going to say Congress has to rule on this. How does that not entirely undercut, circumvent, and destroy the concept of separation of powers, right? Executive, legislative, judicial, right? How can Congress 100 plus years ago pass an act, the FTC Act, that says what it says, and fast forward, right, 100 years, and now the Supreme Court can say, it says what it says, but we think this is a very major thing, right? It's the kind of shit that sounds like a fifth grader made it up. You know what? We have these rules, we have these systems, like this is how it applies, this is what it says, but oh, it's a major question. Go back to Congress, right? They don't teach you that shit in America, in elementary school, and in middle school and high school. They don't teach you that shit. They teach you that, like, it's a well-oiled machine, right? And it all works prim and proper, and here's how it, operates and everything according to. No, it's all a fucking scam, okay? And this situation completely and clearly illustrates that. So the odds are it goes to the Supreme Court emperors and they say it's a major question. They say the FTC overstepped its authority and then Congress has to rule. So never mind the actual language of the act. Never mind what Congress did or intended 100 years ago. We just don't like this, so it's a major question. Go back to Congress. But I've been surprised, okay? I've been surprised by some of the recent Supreme Court decisions. So I'd probably put it 70-30 that the Supreme Court shuts it down and sends it back to Congress and says it's a major question, because Supreme Court justices are not legal actors, they're political actors. But there's 30%. What's the silver lining, right? What's the silver lining? Having defended non-compete cases in a pro-non-compete slave state for 10 plus years against all comers, in cases where my client was making $20 million or cases where my client was making $12, why did I do that? I did it because I saw a very big problem that was affecting millions and millions of Americans, and I knew that most people were just too afraid and didn't have the guts to actually go attack it the right way and call it out for what it was. Because basically everybody in law just minds their P's and Q's and doesn't want to make the wrong enemies and wants to stay on the right side of power and money. But I really don't give a shit. I'm not a house Negro, son. I'm a field hand. I'm a flight risk. And everybody knows it. So I went after it, right? I went after it and I got in the mix and I made a dent in the system. And I was I was one of the original drivers of all the shit that just happened with the FTC and everything else. All the professors, whose research into law and economics and antitrust in the non-compete space all those professors who started doing that in 2015, 2016, 2017, they're all derivative of me, and many of them reached out to me and read my stuff and followed my cases, right? So I was the original driver of getting non-compete agreements banned. Shit, the White House has reached out to me on this stuff. Congress, the Senate has reached out to me. Everybody's reached out to me on this stuff. I'm the original bald-headed jerk-faced meanie, right? Ruining everybody's night. It's like Forrest Gump when he's like, sorry to have a fight in the middle of your Black Panther party. Sorry I had a fight in the middle of your little non-compete party. I know everybody was profiteering and having a great old time, right? Old-timey muckety mucks, right? Restricting people's ability to go make a freaking living because they have our trade secrets. You don't have any trade secrets. Your trade secret's a list of B2B customers you post on your freaking website. Get real. Don't make me laugh. Don't make me laugh so hard I spit out my cold brew iced coffee. So the silver lining, though, people, ultimate, even if it does go to the Supremes, which it will, and even if the Supremes do shoot it down, send it back to Congress, the reality is that the arc of history is long. That's not my words, right? I'm not even quoting it correctly, but that's the general sentiment. The arc of history is long, and it bends toward justice. And so you just keep going. You just keep going. Happy Wednesday.